It's my pleasure to welcome you to the Goucher College Athenaeum for our annual public program of the Kratz Center for Creative Writing. And we are thrilled that we now have the founder of the Kratz Center for Creative Writing, or the co-founder of it, back with us teaching at Goucher after a 5-year leave, Madison Smart Bell. And we're extremely proud and fortunate to have Madison and Beth Spires, his wife, here at Goucher in the Kratz Center, and being wonderful mentors to our creative writing students. Madison has returned this year, and it's my great pleasure to introduce him so that he can introduce our wonderful speaker for this evening, Lynda Barry. But I will pause there so that I don't take Madison's lines away from him. Madison?
I first began following Lynda Barry's work in the alternative papers of the early 1980s. Before long, I saw her absurdly titled Ernie Pook's Comique begin to develop durable characters and long storylines. Gradually, readers became aware that Barry had created something completely new in the United States, a graphic narrative which could equal or surpass the best of contemporary literary fiction in realism, depth, complexity, and nuance. In 4 illustrated panels, Barry could achieve all the textures of an episode of an excellent novel, and she did so over and over for many years this long story ran. There had never been anything quite like it before. If Barry had done nothing but this work, she would be long remembered. However, her work has continued to grow in several different directions as she continues to experiment with different modes of both narrative and visual art. Among more recent books such as The Good Times Are Killing Me, 100 Demons, and What It Is, there is a great variety of visual expression. Barry has made forays into theater and spoken word, and has written comparatively conventional fiction like Cruddy, a remarkable novel which bears comparison to Huckleberry Finn. Lynda Barry also has a long career as a radically innovative teacher and now has a cross-disciplinary appointment at the University of Wisconsin to pursue this interest. She works with the unself-conscious freedom of a pre-adolescent child, and her teaching brings this sensibility close to the Zen beginner's mind. And this is something that I think she has in common with the donor who created the Kratz Center, Eleanor Kratz Denoon, who I knew in her old age, but who had the child's capacity to welcome any experience and the wisdom of an old one to understand it. What Lynda teaches, or better said, encourages, is not technique, but an attitude of openness to experience and to one's most natural powers of expression. In the last couple of days, she has taught 2 truly mind-blowing classes here at Goucher, and those of us who were there can promise the rest of you she's also a whole lot of fun. Please welcome Lynda Barry.
Well, hello. I'm so happy to be here, and thank you for that introduction, and thank you to everything that happened that made it so that my entire physical body is standing here right now. Although I speak in public a lot, I always get incredibly nervous. That's why it's nice to have a podium so that no one can see your legs shaking. And so what I always do when I'm nervous is I sing. I sing because it's the scariest thing you can do in front of people, and since I'm already terrified anyway, what the hell, right? It's sort of like when I was a I went through my first heartbreak when I was like, I don't know, 23, 24, the real first one where, you know, like I'd sleep in my clothes holding my car keys in case he called and really had changed his mind. You know, and I'd look and I'd cry so much, and I'd look in the mirror and Mrs. Potato Head would be looking back at me and we'd both be crying. And all of a sudden I realized this is a good time to get my wisdom teeth out, because I realized I looked like hell and felt like hell, and they'd give me painkillers. So what I wanted to say to the younger people in the audience, or anybody who might have their wisdom teeth, hang on to them, because there may be a time when they come in very, very handy. Okay, so the song that I sing, okay, so the tune is Coal Miner's Daughter. I'm just going to sing a verse, but it's the autobiographical part, and by the end you'll know a little bit of where I came from. Okay, so I'm just going to do it, okay, because it's terrifying. I was born a meat cutter's daughter. My mom is from the Philippines. She was a janitor. I ate TV dinners at night. I grew up by the TV light, while Dad drank vodka in the basement and Mom hollered. So the part I like about singing that is when I say my mom's from the Philippines, she was, you know, I can see people like getting the confused German Shepherd look, like, she doesn't look like she's from the Philippines. And I always tell people it's because I'm part Filipino, but I'm also a quarter Norwegian, and Norwegian blood can suck the color out of anything. If you think I'm joking, if you have a shirt that you love that has a stubborn stain and you know somebody who's 100% Norwegian, just ask them to pass their hands over the stain 3 times. Coming to Goucher means a lot to me because this school seems the closest to my alma mater, which is where my entire career, everything that I care about, began at that school. I went to the Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington, which has a lot of similarities to Goucher, but it only came about in 1972. It was when people thought hippies were here to stay, and the Washington State legislature said, let's make a college for them. And everybody said, that sounds like a good idea. And everybody voted, and motion passed. And so they built this college for hippies, but it was for hippies, and they don't want to go to college, right? So they were letting anyone in, which is how I was able to go. And I always tell people that my entrance essay was index card, Elmer's glue, peace sign, lentils, full scholarship. And so, it was there that I met my teacher. Her name's Marilyn Frasca. I still consider her my teacher. I think this is another thing about Goucher, that you actually have relationships with your teacher, and you even know who your president is. And turns out that your president is friends with the president at my school, so we're all sort of cousins at the cousins picnic. And it was at Evergreen that I had a teacher who asked me a question that has guided my life ever since. It seems like a pretty easy question. The question was, what is an image? And it was a painting class that I was in, and I certainly, that's what I did. I didn't expect to become a writer or a cartoonist or anything else, except for this one question made all this stuff happen. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what an image is. That's what I'm going to be talking about tonight. So an image, the way I understood what she had to say, is an image that is something that's contained by everything that we call the arts. Contains an image. And in my own work and research, I've come to believe that it's also contained by anything that a kid is really attached to, any object. And if you start noticing this, you'll notice kids are often carrying something when they're walking around, and I became very interested in what these things were. And I remember seeing a kid go by, his mom's dragging him along, and he used to have the whole Incredible Hulk doll, but all he had left was the leg. You know, it's like, the leg's all I need, man. And so it was all he needed. And I'd say that contains an image. So it's easier for me to show you what an image feels like rather than describe it, so I'm going to show you what it feels like. I want you to remember your first phone number, because we're about to say it out loud together. Ready? I'm going to count to 3. 1, 2, 3. PA 24435. All right, let's just do it one more time because it's too awesome for me. 1, 2, 3. PA 24435. All right, For some of you who are older in the audience, and think of your phone number from 3 phone numbers ago. It's hard to do. Or for people who are younger, you know what are the initials of your first crush? Think of them, because we're about to say those. The initials of your very first crush. 1, 2, 3. BR. Okay, now your crush from 3 crushes ago. See how you have to think? If we were doing an fMRI of your brain right now, you'd see a completely different signature than when you were thinking of that first phone number or the initials of your first crush. That's spontaneous. The other part is thinking. So one thing about an image is it has a spontaneous quality. Another thing about it is it makes us do something. So after you all said your first phone number, I saw everybody do this. You know, like, and people, except for people who couldn't think of it. You know, what the hell is that? Social Security number, first phone number. So that's one thing about an image. Another thing about it is it feels somehow alive, and I think that we are hardwired to use images. We began using them before we even can speak. And I always think of, you know, when you meet little kids, or maybe some of you were one of these people who had a blankie. But you all know what I'm talking about, right? A blankie that you just need. I always think of that as the first artwork because it is really a piece of cloth, but it also contains something else. And I'd say it contains an image. It contains something else that somehow the kid put in there and the whole family recognizes. And so, well, I'll talk a little bit about how that works. So let's say it's not a blankie. Say the kid's really attached to a little bunny, and we're talking to maybe a 6-year-old. If you say to a 6-year-old, is Bunny alive? Well, the 6-year-old will go, no, menopausal woman, Bunny's not alive. I'm sorry about, you know, your health benefits being cut and your, Bunny's not alive. And then you say, is Bunny dead? It's like, hell no, don't ever talk about Bunny that way. Bunny is not dead. Bunny's not alive, Bunny's not dead, Bunny's something in between. So that, I'd say, that in-betweenness contains an image. And here's a story that illustrates it really well. I had some friends whose daughter got attached to what they considered the ugliest toy ever, which was this real cheap stuffed banana with big blue eyes and little dangling arms. She called it Mr. Banana. She was like really in love with Mr. Banana. And so Mr. Banana at 2, she really needed Mr. Banana. 3, still needs Mr. Banana. 4, 5, now she's 6. Mr. Banana's looking kind of like a junkie. You know, he's been around a long time, and the parents are not liking her carrying this dirty piece of fabric around with her. So they, clearly, my friends didn't have a background in child psychology, and they decided that they were going to get her off of Mr. Banana, and they were going to do it while they were on vacation. Like, brilliant, right? So they went to England, they went to London, and they had this, their plan was to just slowly wean her off of Mr. Banana. So on the first morning that they were there, they said, we're going to go out for a walk, go out and get something to eat. Mr. Banana wants to stay in the hotel room. And she's looking at him like, no, he doesn't. It's like, yeah, he really wants to stay. She goes, no, he doesn't. But they finally convince her. So they go out. I always imagine them going out, looking at each other like, you know, like, and they go and they have their food and they go back to their room and the room's been cleaned and Mr. Banana is gone. Did you hear that? Y'all don't even know Mr. Banana and you're like, oh, not Mr. Banana. It's because you do know Mr. Banana. You know exactly what I'm talking about. And so what happens? She starts screaming. The parents suddenly have this moment of clarity that the entire vacation's about to go to hell. My friend calls downstairs to explain the situation, and luckily the concierge also understands the concept of Mr. Banana, and my friend said the happiest phone call he ever got in his life was, ring, 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 Mr. Banana has been found. You know, yay! And then a knock on the door, and here they are carrying this little thing, and the girl runs and holds it, everybody's happy. And I think about that because Mr. Banana really is a piece of cloth. With some stuffing left inside of him. He's also the difference of whether that girl's going to be able to sleep or not that night. And she invented him, and the whole family knows about him. So that's one thing about an image, and about containing an image. And we continue to do this as we get older. Some of you have had a book that you've been meaning to read. Sometimes if somebody tells me, you really got to read this, I was thinking of you the whole time, that means I can't read it for like 10 years. Or I have to lie Did you like the book? Yeah. Where that main character went through some changes? The end. And it's like, but you've had the book that's kicking around, and then you start to read it, and you know that thing when you're reading a book and you're, I don't know, like 10 or 15 pages into it, and all of a sudden you realize this could be a good book? It's weird. It's like getting a little crush on someone, you know? And then you're like 20 pages in, 30, 40, this is a really good book. 50 pages, don't mess up this relationship, man. And then it's a real good book, so maybe you just plow through it in a couple of days. And you're up late at night, it's 3 in the morning, you know you're supposed to go to bed, but you have maybe 40 pages left of this great book. What do? Don't you slow down? Which is kind of wild. You slow down, right? You slow down, and then you read the very end of the book. And then what do? Don't you hold the book and look at it? What the hell's that? You know, it's like, hello, book. It's like, hello, Lynda. I mean, you almost want to, like, something happened. An image got into that book, so much so that if you lend that copy to one of your friends and they lose it and they buy you a new one, it's not the same. So that's another thing about an image, is it feels somehow alive. Another thing about an image is it's very specific. When I was a kid, I always heard about people who had imaginary friends. And I wanted one, but I didn't know how to get one, so I just like, how do you get one? You know, I didn't know how to get one, and then I realized I could just lie, which meant I had an imaginary friend, which is not nearly as good as a real imaginary friend. And I had a friend who I could tell had a very real imaginary friend. I believed in her imaginary friend. One, the friend had a very stupid name, Sprinkles. Like, you know, you wouldn't choose that if you were thinking. Two, there were specific things about Sprinkles, and she could only speak to Sprinkles through a moving fan. Like, Sprinkles, you can't make that up. That's a real imaginary friend. So it was this specificness. And I had a friend who found his journals from high school and told me, and he was really excited to read them over, so, you know, he was over 50. And he said that he took his journals and he poured a big old beer, and he started reading through them, and he's reading through them, and he's reading through them, and he said, Lynda, it was all feelings, just feelings, no images, just feelings. I still hate school, I hate this, and I love this, and I hate this, but there were no details, and the way he described it is he said, it was like finding original footage of the Battle of Waterloo, but it was shot by a monkey, so there's no pictures of Napoleon, it's just bananas, 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 bananas. Another thing about an image is it tends to be spontaneous and unplanned. There are a lot of ties between when kids are in deep play and when adults are in creative concentration. So it's not like, you know, no kid does Barbie, Ken, we're about to play. It's going to be a 3-act. In the beginning, we'll do the setup for the plot, and y'all will be, you know, have some attraction for each other. Act 2. Another Ken doll will come in and you'll both have very strong feelings for him. And Act 3, somehow this is resolved, and then the denouement, let's play. And I mean, nobody does it like that, right? And another thing about an image is an image almost always contains a little bit of anxiety. It doesn't have to be unpleasurable anxiety, but I remember the way I would play with Barbie and Ken was I'd have them do this thing that I called naked picnic under the piano. And I'd take off all their clothes and I'd just stick them together under the piano and go, what are they doing there? You know? So when kids are in deep play, one of the things that they found, because they have fMRIs now, and they can't, fMRIs, I wish that they were as precise as they're presented to be, you know, in popular culture. They're not. They mostly just measure blood flow, and I always cracked up when they say, the brain lights up when you think of this, and I wish it did, because I just go in the basement and disco out with, you know, like all my thoughts. But one of the things that's really interesting is that when a kid is in deep play, and an adult is in a state of creative concentration, the signatures in the brain look very, very similar. And what I mean by deep play, it's not, you know, when we get older, we confuse play with fun. They're not the same thing. And if you watch a kid who's really engaged in play, they don't look like they're having fun. They don't look like they're having a bad time. They look like they're elsewhere. And I remember I was watching, I have this thing because this is the first time in human history that a mother and a father, because of these digital devices that we carry around, actually have something that's more compelling to look at than their child's face, which is a really big accomplishment for technology. That's hard to pull off. And it also has huge repercussions in terms of all kinds of neurotransmitters that are going on in our brain that have to do with attachment. And a lot of it comes from eye contact. So this is a pretty interesting time. And I often time parents to see how long, if they're holding a digital device, how long until they have eye contact with their kids versus if they don't have a device. And what I end up seeing is a lot of kids kind of falling into deep play. And so I was watching this mother and a kid having breakfast, and the kid's probably about 6. The mom's on her cell phone, and she's yakking. And the kid's trying to get her attention, and she does this thing where she just turns so that she won't even accidentally look at him. So he's by himself, and he's eating his breakfast, and he picks up this piece of bacon, and he looks at it, and I watch him go, "I'm going to eat you," right? And then he does the bacon. "No, please don't eat me." He says, "Yes, I'm going to eat you." And I'm like riveted. How's this going to come out? You know, who's going to win? Him and me, the bacon, we're all engaged, right? And he's really into it. And his mother stops just long enough to go, "What are you doing?" And then he has no idea. "I'm just wiggling bacon like a fool." I think that that's a really good metaphor for what happens when we start to do something creative. That we start doing this thing, and then there's a part of us that goes, "What are you doing?" So another thing about an image is that it's satisfying, even if it doesn't make sense to the top of the mind. There was a song that I loved listening to when I was in junior high school by the Young Rascals called "Groovin'," and this part of it went, "Groovin' on a Sunday afternoon." And there was this line that I loved, "That would be ecstasy, you and me and Leslie groovin'." I thought that sounded good to me, right? You and me and Leslie groovin'. I didn't know who Leslie was, but that sounded good to me. And I liked that Leslie was a boy or a girl's name, and that would fit however I was swinging that year. You know, I just loved you and me and Leslie groovin'. And then when I got older, and I had a car of my own that didn't have blown out speakers, here comes my song, and it's on. That would be ecstasy, you and me endlessly groovin'. It's not you and me and Leslie groovin'. It's you and me endlessly groovin', which is the better lyric. It's Leslie, right? It's Leslie. Even if you don't know who Leslie is an image. Leslie is specific. What's the first thing an editor might take out? Well, Leslie isn't introduced anywhere else in the song and doesn't contribute to the arc of the song. I say what about endlessly? Endlessly rhymes, it makes sense, and I'd say, you know, it cuts the balls right off the song and throws them out the window where I'm waiting. And so a version of that, about that specificness and actually story structure, I think is really tied around carrying an image. I was sitting next to this kid on a plane, and again, his mom's, they always put the kid in the middle. Mom's over on the end, and she gets her little device out. She's like, has her earbuds in. Thankfully, this kid who was sitting next to me, who was about 8, had a sticker book. He didn't have a device, and I had a drawing pad. So what I do is I realize I can't go up to kids and go, "Would you like to discuss your transitional object?" It's like, no, scary woman, no. So what I do instead is I just start to draw. And I draw kind of in a big way to make sure they're like looking. And so I'm drawing, and he looks over and he goes, "You can draw?" I go, "Yeah, I'm a cartoonist." And he goes, "Draw something." So I draw a chicken, right? And he goes, "You are." And I go, "I know." And so I ask him if he wants to play this game, and it's a game that all of us have played. Everybody invents it kind of on their own, where you scribble something because you're bored and you pass it to your friend, and then they look at the scribble and they turn it into something, and then they pass it. And if you do this a couple times with a kid, you'll get a story. This kid's name was Jack. So we do it 2 or 3 times, and he goes, ooh, I have a story. And I always thought that's what creative inspiration would be like. Ooh, I have a novel. It's a trilogy. I mean, it would be great, right? But it doesn't work that way. But this dude, that's what was happening. He goes, I have a story. You can make it into a comic strip. And I did. And he goes, the title is, dude didn't even know what the story was, but he knew what, the title is Chicken Attack by Jack. I did make it into a comic strip, and this is the story verbatim. One morning, a chicken was eaten by a man. The man went to work. His stomach started to feel funny. He went to the portalette, and then he went. The chicken came out. The man was surprised. The chicken was also surprised. The chicken ran from the portalette to the construction site. They put the chicken in charge, and from then on, the chicken was boss. Isn't that an oddly satisfying story? I mean, what's really wild about it is none of it makes sense, and yet don't you feel better after hearing Chicken Attack by Jack? I'd say that story contains an image. Where it's located exactly, I can't tell, but I think it contains an image. So what happened is, as we were getting off the plane, I was talking to his mother. I said, you know, this kid really tells some good stories. And she's like, mm-hmm. And I said, well, we just wrote a story. I'm a cartoonist. And she's looking at me like, mm-hmm, sure. And I said, no, and so I showed her the story. And what she did was she looked at her son and said, enough with the portalettes. So another thing about an image is there's a part of our brain that can't recognize them and tries to eliminate them and get rid of them because they don't make sense to the top of the mind. This signature that I was talking about in people's brains that at least they can measure on an fMRI, or not an fMRI, I think it's the kind that an EEG or an EKG. The thing that's interesting is that because the signature looks so similar, I got a clue about this idea of what is an image, and the thing that I'm very interested in is what the biological function of this thing that we call the arts may be, because I don't think we would have hauled it through all our changes throughout history unless it had a biological function, and I don't think the longing in every single person on this earth to be able to do these things, in the same way we long to be able to fly and turn invisible, would persist. So I thought, well, let's look at this. If it's in kids, what do we know? And it has something to do with deep play. What do we know about kids? And I thought, okay, if I was going to do an experiment and I'm going to have this kid and give them everything that they need, but they're not going to be able to play at all until they're 21, ever. Till they're 21. What do we know about that person by the time they're 21? We know they'd be crazy, right? There's a tacit understanding. My little Filipino grandma and my giant Norwegian grandma both could answer that question. There's a tacit understanding between the play and mental health. Okay, so say that the kid can't play, but I'm going to show him a picture of a kid who's really good at playing Legos. Is that going to help? It's not going to help. How about we'll watch a video? Don't move. But you can watch a video of a kid playing. That's not going to help. Live, we're going to go see a kid play Lego live. You can't play. You can just watch. That's not going to help either. And that's the state that most adults are in by the time they grow up, that the arts are still in their lives, but mainly as just watching or singing in the car and occasionally hitting a good note and looking at yourself in the mirror going, shit, I can sing. And it's amazing how early we give up on these things. I remember being in the back of the car and hearing a guy on the radio saying, if you'd like to play the violin, you have to begin by the age of 3. And I'm like 9, right? And I'm like, damn. And like, if you want to be a ballerina, it must happen by the age of 3. And I'm like, damn. And by the time you're 12, you're sort of washed up, right? You know, it's kind of over for you. And the only arts that are left for you are, well, for singing, it's, you know, Happy Birthday, which people sing in the most, Happy Birthday to. I knew there was something wrong. I remember going to Mass when I was a kid. I was raised Catholic. And it was similar to when the priest would come to and say, lift up your hearts. And we'd go, we've sort of lifted them to the Lord. You know, it's like something's missing there. The animating spirit, the image was missing from that. The only dancing that's left for a lot of people or movement is the saddest movement of all time, which is exercise. You know, just. And if you don't have the right outfit on, it's like, oh, I think her benefits, like, yeah, and the medical benefits must have been cut. But, the only drawing that we have left is the little doodles that we do, you know, in that one little space on the paper while we're bored out of our minds. Or sculpture, it's tearing the label off of a bottle of beer slowly while someone tells you their dream. You know that thing where you just need something to claw when somebody's telling you their dream? So I started to think about how this image stuff worked for me, and I started to think back. I'll show you a little picture. See if you can spot the one with Norwegian blood in there. That's me with my cousins. And we were raised by my grandma, who's a Filipino woman. This is what Tagalog sounds like. Matigas ang ulo ni Lynda, nako po. That means hard is the head of Lynda. Oh my. And my grandma had this way of, her way of child rearing had everything to do with images and stories. For example, she'd say, you know, Lynda, in God, he loves you. And in heaven, after you die, he has a gold castle. Just for you, it's just your castle. It's beautiful. It's made with golden bricks. Oh, it's so nice. But every time you're bad, he takes one. And then he'd say, my grandma would say, in Lynda, your castle is getting very small. That's, you know, or she'd say, you know, Lynda, in the Philippines, there is a very scary vampire. She's a scary one. During the day, she's not so scary, she's a dog. But at night, she turns into a beautiful woman. And then she takes her legs off. And you're like, what? She takes her legs off? Yeah, she takes her legs off. She puts them somewhere. Then she starts to fly in the air. She's flying. She flies to our house. You know, sometimes when you're looking at the television and it jumps, the aswang is up on the antenna. There. She's flying, and at night she can come through even a small crack. And she comes at night, we're all asleep, she comes into our house. She's looking for your bedroom. She crawls on the ceiling like this. She's crawling. She finds your bedroom. She crawls over your bed. She's hanging onto the ceiling, but she can twist her head all the way. Then she's looking at you. She has a long tongue with a needle on the end, and she's lowering it to suck your blood. Because you won't pick up your clothes. So, yeah, that's a good. So I started to think about that part of what the thing that I lucked out with was had somebody who in my life who worked with images, who made me mind with images. And I got very interested in this whole thing of that when I presented this idea to you of your first phone number or your first crush versus your crush from 3 crushes ago, I got very interested in what that phenomenon was and began to study hemispheric differences of the brain. And I wanted to just show you this little clip of he's a neuroscientist named Michael Gazzaniga, who in 1961, it was at Caltech. He worked with Roger Sperry, who ended up winning the Nobel Prize. And they started to work there. They worked with people who had intractable epilepsy. And the only thing that they could figure out to do was to sever this band of fibers that connect the 2 sides of your brain. It's called the corpus callosum. And when you sever that, what happens is, what they thought that thing did was that was a little bridge that the thoughts and all these things got from one side to the other, even though they know now that it's not that simple. But you know that this side of the brain controls this side of the body, this side of the brain controls this side of the body, right? So what happened with these people when their corpus callosum was severed was one woman talked about, and eventually the brain was able to rejigger itself. But one woman talked about how after her recovery, her epilepsy did stop, but she'd go to get dressed in the morning and her right hand would go to pick out the outfit she was going to wear. left hand had a completely different idea about what outfit it was going to wear and wouldn't give up. And she'd talk about having to call her daughter, it's happening again, and her daughter would like have to, or she'd go to buy something that the right hand thought was a good buy, and she talked about her left hand just snatching the money right out of the cashier's hands. So let's see if I can play this video for you. And you can see, oh, no, that's not going to do it. No, okay, hold on. I have a backup plan. There it is. Come on. Here we go, it's loading. Okay, so you're going to see an example of two hands fighting. It's the same guy, and the guy, well, you'll see. This was 1961.
So that a split-brain person can be sitting here, and when we flash on a picture, say an orange, into the right visual field, that information is only projected into the left hemisphere. And we found that the patient says that he describes it as an orange, and no matter what the stimuli, words, pictures, they describe in a correct manner. Similar visual stimuli are flashed into the left visual field, which go to the right hemisphere, such as a fork, like you see here. The patient will say, when asked, the experimenter will ask, what did you see? And the patient will say, I didn't see anything. And the experimenter will then say, well, pick out the card that best describes what you may have seen. And sure enough, the patient goes out very calmly and points to the word fork. So that what happens in the split-brain patient is that all the sensory information that is projected and arrives in the left hemisphere can be talked about. But all that information that arrives in the right hemisphere is perceived and acted upon, but is not talked about because the patient has no awareness of it in terms of his ability to verbally, audibly express it out loud.
If speech originates in the left half of the brain, are there any functions special to the other half? Here, a split-brain subject provides the answer. As he tries to copy this pattern with blocks, we discover his ability is confined to his right half brain.
Now let's remember that the left hand is governed from the right hemisphere, and you will see that he has absolutely no problem in solving the problem. When the patient tries to solve the problem with his right hand, which is governed from the left hemisphere, we find that he is not capable of doing it. Namely that the right hand, which is governed from the left hemisphere, is intrinsically incapable of performing this kind of visual constructional tasks. It's interesting to note that the whole perspective is gone. He has 3-in-1 block combinations. It doesn't even square them up. You can see the left hand wants to keep helping the right and is interfering. Well, we're now seeing that the left hand can perform the problem and that the right hand cannot. Now the question becomes, what happens when you allow both hands together to try to solve the problem? And what we find out is that they fight over each other. One hand knows how to do it, and one hand does not, and so they more or less squabble. And the reason for this is that the hemispheres are disconnected. The right hemisphere controls the left hand, and the left hemisphere controls the right hand. And these are almost mutually independent systems. It was as if two people were fighting over performing this task. One knew how and one didn't, and one would fight for dominance of the situation.
You all have had that experience when you're making something, right? Where the groove's on, everything's going well, and then suddenly it's like, no, that can't be right. What they didn't know when they did this experiment was that the right hemisphere, let's see, where are we? Hold on, I gotta just find this. The right hemisphere has an ability, a spatial ability that the left hemisphere doesn't. And also, it has an ability with metaphor and visual images and faces. So, and it's not like one thing happens on one side or the other, but there's something really interesting about the fact that one side has language and the other side doesn't have language. Okay. So now I'm going to just show you some slides. If I could ask the light monitor to turn the house lights down, that would be beautiful. I'm very interested in poetry, even though I'm not a poet, but I'll just show you some slides. Poems can make you see the world you are in as if it could be read like poetry. That is to say, there is a meaning way of looking, a seeing that is new, and something looking back now, alive with you in view, that wants to swallow you. What is an image? The formless thing which gives things form. And when an image comes to us, When images come to us, where do they come from? Why do they exist? And I say, I believe they are the soul's immune system and transit system. So this is one of my characters, Arna, and this is a little story about her finding a book at a library called Picture This. And she's able to find it one day and then not find it again. The book was laying on the table at the library, and on the cover was a picture of a monkey wearing glasses, and the monkey was smoking, and she had a pet chicken, and the chicken also smoked, but not as much as the monkey. What kind of book was it? While you were out, you had a visitor. Was it a book for kids or grown-ups? The monkey drank beer, played cards, and bought lottery tickets. Was that a good influence? Should she check the book out or not? The line was long, and Marlis didn't want to wait. The announcement came on. The library is closing. Arna, man, come on, my show's gonna be on. We gotta go. Marlis would not wait. Bye, man, seriously, I'm out the door. The nearsighted monkey won't fold. And so this is here's some more poetry. This is, I'll tell you who it is in a minute. I'll just read it to you. Art thou abroad on this stormy night on thy journey of love, my friend? The sky groans like one in despair. I have no sleep tonight. Ever and again I open my door and look out on the darkness, my friend. I can see nothing before me. I wonder where lies thy path. By what dim shore of the ink-black river? By what far edge of the frowning forest? Through what mazy depth of gloom art thou treading thy course to come to me, my friend? While you were sleeping, the nearsighted monkey arrives with her imaginary friend. The staring cephalopod invites you to attend. Please attend. Attend to the back of your mind. There's a song called My Mind's Got a Mind of Its Own, and there's me and my husband, Kevin. What's wrong, hon? Nothing, I'm moody. How come? I don't know. It's a good way to put it. You want to walk the grove? Yeah, but no, which means, I don't know. The thing I call my mind seems to be kind of like a landlord that doesn't really know its tenants. Who's playing that music? That song I say is stuck in my head. Which apartment are they in? Are you worried about your book? Oh, there's my book, the war, the laundry, things I said 15 years ago, the environment, my double chin, unanswered mail, what an ass I am, what a dirty house we have. And I've had the song Goodbye Yellow Brick Road playing in my head for days. Where do sudden troublesome thoughts come from? What about you? He says, oh, for me it's tornadoes, family, all the wood I still need to cut. And then there's this kind of a K-Tales collection of my 25 greatest screw-ups. I play that one all the time. I say, man, I know, I'm still cringing about stuff I said when I was 9. Why is there anxiety about a past we cannot change? The top of my mind has no answer for this. There's another part of my mind which seems not to know what year it is at all. I mean, I find myself arguing in my head with people I haven't seen in 15 years, or apologizing, or trying just to explain. It's like there's a place in me where it's all alive. What year is it in your imagination? Does your imagination know what year it is? When I was little, I played a certain staring game that seemed to have invented itself. I'd hold myself as still as I could, and I'd make my eyes like a toy's eyes that don't move, and I would wait. I would wait for the other things in the room to forget about me and begin to move. And my mood seemed to have a lot to do with it. I'd have to make myself very calm and very friendly, the way I would when I wanted a shy animal to come to me. And I knew I had to be patient and willing to wait for a very long time. We lived in a trailer then, and any pictures we had were taped to the walls, and sometimes they fell, but this is not what I mean when I say they could move. I believed there was another world that would show itself to me in the smallest ways. The gray kitten in the picture by my bed would accidentally blink his eyes. The girl in the picture would breathe. I believed there was another world, but I only noticed it when it became harder to get to. There had been a time when a toy elephant was as alive as a real rabbit in the grass. I didn't know there were different kinds of aliveness in two worlds contained by each other. Something can only become an illusion after disillusionment. Before that, it's something real. What caused the disillusionment? No one told me that the print on the wall was just ink and paper and had no life of its own. At some point, the cat stopped blinking and I stopped thinking it could. But my memory of the blinking cat is still vivid nearly 50 years later. Why? Why would an image of something which never happened travel with me for all these years? Why do shapes appear in shadows and stains? So Marlis and Arna are in bed, and Marlis says, "See there? That's the boss of everyone, the pirate chicken." "Where?" "By the light fixture. I need my glasses on. Next car goes by, you'll see the headlights slide over the pirate chicken." "Okay, now I'm seeing it." Is there a power that makes them show themselves? Now you, except no monsters. It's got to be something nice. When we see water-stained creatures, are we inventing them, or is the ceiling inventing them? "Well, I see Gulita." "Oh, stupid Gulita again, man." "No, you love Gulita. You invented her." Gulita invented herself. When I try not to see monsters, they are everywhere. Why has it got to be nice? Because that's the rule. You want to forfeit? What's a story made of? What and where is a story before it becomes words? Imaginary enemies are not hard to conjure into being, and adults are especially good at it, able to create them and unite against them for ages. The friends are harder to come by. Singular and elusive, they do not appear for others, and they don't stay. Mine didn't. The memory stayed, but once I knew the blinking cat could not really blink, was just paper and ink, I never saw my friend again, not in the outside world anyway. But paper and ink have conjuring abilities of their own. Arrangements of lines and shapes of letters and words on a series of pages make a world we can dwell and travel in. I traveled up the mountain as Heidi. I slept on a straw bed in the hayloft and heard the high wind in the trees, and I despaired for my future there, not knowing what was to come. I remember it like it happened to me, and I suppose you could say that it did. Oops. There are certain children who are told they are too sensitive, and there are certain adults who believe sensitivity is a problem that can be fixed in the way crooked teeth can be fixed and made straight. And when these two come together, you get a fairy tale, a kind of story with hopelessness in it. And I believe there's something in these old stories that does what singing does to words. They have transformational capabilities in the way melody can transform mood. They can't transform your actual situation, but they can transform your experience of it. We don't create a fantasy world to escape reality. We create it to be able to stay. And I believe we have always done this, used images to stand and understand what would otherwise be intolerable. It seems that human beings everywhere understand that a child who's never allowed to play will eventually go mad. But how do we know this? And why do we know this? And what happens when we forget? Who does war belong to? Who does natural disaster belong to? Who does death belong to? That's my mother. My mother was a child during the Japanese invasion of the Philippines. She was 9, and her family lived in hiding for 4 years. But I didn't, like a lot of people who grew up with a family, a parent that lived through the war, there wasn't, in a weird way, they never talked about it. In a weird way, they never stopped talking about it. So a certain airplane would go over, and she'd say, "Oh, I hate that airplane sound." And I'd go, "How come?" And she goes, "You ask too many questions. You know that? You talk too much." What happens to the unspeakable? What happens to the unthinkable? What is a memory? When an unexpected memory comes calling, who answers? And what is and where is your imagination? And when we imagine things we don't want to imagine, why can't we stop ourselves? What is the past? Where is it located? Is it everywhere, nowhere, somewhere, anywhere, elsewhere, right here? My response to a series of well-known disasters and the unexpected deaths of several friends was a confusing compulsion to paint cute animal pictures. In particular, the meditating monkey, first drawn while crying in an airport bar en route to a funeral. I found it helped, and I drew it again and again. I've since painted hundreds, maybe thousands. There's always a pathway that's lost. My mother found comfort in coloring books after the war, even as a young adult. She was balanced when she was hand coloring. Not happy, not sad, free of that. Color crayons and hand motions over pictures of cute animals made a way for her. Is making a picture and coloring a picture something other than art? What's the difference between drawing and singing? In terrible times, people sing. Things can be said no other way. Mourners sing. Music wakes away. It's not a way out, but a way in. Where do you go when you color? Where can a brush take you? It can take you to the singing place. There is a place where characters dwell, and it's not in thinking. Scrooge and Hamlet are there, along with certain toys we played with. Superman and Batman are there. Sherlock Holmes and King Friday and Lassie is there. Eleanor Rigby is there. And when we are all gone, perhaps we'll be there too, alive in the image world again and again. So I'm very interested in people who've given up on drawing, particularly people who gave up on drawing around, who figured out they were bad artists at about 9 or 10. And I have found that if I can get them to draw, they draw these mind-bending pictures. And so this is a piece that I wrote that's actually, it's my first big being published in a journal, the University of Chicago, in their Journal for Critical Inquiry. So this is like a scientific paper, which I think is hilarious. And it's called Let's Draw a Car, and then Let's Draw Batman. And these were drawn by, they're drawn by adults. There's something beautiful in the lines made by people who stopped drawing a long time ago. And there's something curious about how scared they are when I ask them to draw a car for 2 minutes or 1 minute. It's an exercise from cartooning, Philosophy and Practice by Ivan Brunetti, that I sometimes use during the first part of a workshop I teach called Writing the Unthinkable. Draw a car, even if you don't know how. See what happens. And what usually happens is a kind of involuntary laughing that sounds like the laughing of people who are about to enter a spook house ride. Just how scary is this ride going to get? Your car begins to take shape, and the shape it takes seems out of your control, and there's a thrill there, and a terror too, that becomes especially evident when I ask people to stand up and take a look at each other's drawings. I've had people literally run out of the room. Just tell, I'm in the wrong workshop, and like run, and these are like, it's like a physics professor had to book because he was scared people would see his car. All we did was draw a car, but the room feels like it's on fire. Why? Some of the cars are quite far out, and some are barely there, like phantoms made of ghost lines. Others are more certain, and some seem to feel their way in. The same thing happens when I ask them to draw Batman. Sometimes someone knows just how to do it, but mostly they are not sure of the way, but because they only have a limited amount of time to do it, thinking it over doesn't come into play, and a natural kind of picture comes out, like this, and this, and this. And sometimes we say, this kind of picture looks like a kid drew it. You can see in those other Batmans, that one up on the right, the person was really struggling, just couldn't figure out to put the bat ears on. And then went around and looked at the other ones and went, I'm so stupid, I'm so stupid. And really, this whole response came from wiggling a pen on a piece of paper. And people are dismayed by the childlike drawing. They're dismayed by this and even ashamed enough to destroy it immediately. But what if the way kids draw, that kind of line that we call childish, what if it's what a line looks like when someone's having an experience by hand, a live wire? There's an aliveness in these drawings that can't be faked. And when I look at them, that aliveness seems to come into me, and I'm glad to see and feel them. Real aliveness of line is hard to come by. When someone learns to draw, to render, it's the first thing that goes, the aliveness. And it's what some artists spend their whole lives trying to get back. The spook house and the merry-go-round are two different rides. When we say a kind of drawing is good, we may be talking about a certain kind of ride everyone can stand and understand. Though the thrill is gone, it's nice to ride on the merry-go-round. And then there's that other ride, the spook house, the one with all the not knowing that both scares and delights us to bits, to little bits of line that are the tracks we traveled on while screaming and laughing because we had no way to control the outcome. And we were in motion anyway, creating some kind of energy that still runs through the drawing even after we've lifted our hand away. The pictures you see here were made by 35 adults who were together one afternoon in the fall of 2012. I asked them to leave behind any drawings they didn't want. I colored them in, you power them on. So at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, I have an opportunity to work with a lot of scientists. I work at the at the Wisconsin Institutes for Discovery. And one of the things that surprised me about scientists and pure mathematicians and physicists and geneticists too, I expected them to all use computers, but instead they write on everything. In fact, this particular building was made so that every surface can be written on, because apparently these guys just have these ideas and need to write really fast. So I started photographing some of the things that I see at work. So that's a drawing by a physicist, and there it is. You can see there's some little Latin thing down at the bottom. And then I also I was trying to get people to draw and think about what the university will be like or school will be like in 100 years. So this is a physicist. This is a second grader. He says, the classrooms will be inside rockets that can go in the air and under the water. It's another scientist drawing. Second grader. There will be giant steel tents for the school with a lot of windows. They'll have a playground on top, and there'll be an elevator to the playground. Scientist? Second grader. Tall, tall buildings with many classrooms. You have to parachute to get out. Everything in the class turns to candy when you come in. The teachers are candy, the students are candy, the desks are candy, and then it all goes back to normal. You can see that aliveness of line. It'll be in some caves in the side of a mountain. The principal will be in the basement watching everything on a computer, and there will be gymnastics. I love this one. The school will be really small. You have to shrink down to go inside. There'll be books. When you open them, a person's head comes out and tells you what's in the book. And they're floating desks, so you and your partner can work on a project. You just float to another part of the room. This is my favorite. There will be a swimming pool of blood and eyeballs for the scientists to experiment with. This is a volcano school that erupts to get the students out. And this kid was a really interesting kid. So I said, so this is your school of the future? And he goes, yeah. And I said, so tell me about it. He goes, it will be half pink and half orange. I said, all right. And then I looked at it when I got it home, and I looked at those letters at the top, and it says, built 1930, disappeared 1950. That's some spooky. Scientist again. Scientist. Very young scientist. This is drawn by Carl Sagan, who was loved to popularize, to help regular people understand science. He did this when he was about in the 8th grade. It's an ad for his, this is what it says at the bottom. Little star, how I wonder what you are. Have you ever said this rhyme? If you have, and you're interested in joining the crew of a spaceship like the M1, contact the ISS office nearest you, young men and couples from 22 to 32 in top physical condition wanted. Notice chicks, no. Like, please no, because it would be too confusing. So young men and couples. This drawing, this is a drawing by Felix Baumgartner, 5 years old. He's the guy that a little while ago, in October, last October, set the world record for skydiving. And he skydived from 24 miles above the earth. And he was the first person to ever break the sound barrier on his descent. And his mom, he drew that when he was 5, and his mom saved it and gave it to him. It's one of the first drawings of the neuron by Santiago Ramon y Cajal. So he's considered to be the father of neuroscientists, but he was I'll show you him, he's really cute. He's, hands off lady, this one's mine. This is my historical honey. There he is with his Spanish. That's his lab, and he saw the first neurons. And this is Galileo. Those are the drawings that he did when he was looking at the moon, and I was really glad that he didn't have an iPad and could do that instead. Do you wish you could draw? Do you wish you could write? Do you wish you could sing? The nearsighted monkey is making something for you. Broken branches. So what happened is Arna leaves that book in the library and then is never able to find it again. And doesn't even know if she dreamed it or not. Broken branches. It's called a branch library. And they are small compared to the main one, which is too far to walk to. Dang,
See, I told you, closed as of August 31st. Please return books to the main library. It's weird to see it so empty, like it's always been that way. No trace of Granny or Mrs. Ketso or anybody library-ish. There's only a plant in the window, and it's dying. Oh man, another case of window plant tragedy. And then there is a, oh, hold it, this is the last print of that one. There's no one to say goodbye to, but the figurine stuck in the planter, still reading a book like nothing had changed. Goodbye, you stupid elf, says Marlis, and then she asks me why I'm crying. There's a letter in your mailbox. When you see it, you say, oh no, but the nearsighted monkey is coming to visit. Art thou abroad on this stormy night, on thy journey of love, my friend? The sky groans like one in despair. I have no sleep tonight. Ever and again I open my door and look out into the darkness, my friend, and I can see nothing before me, and I wonder where lies thy path. By what dim shore of the ink-black river? By what far edge of the frowning forest? Through what mazy depth of gloom art thou threading thy course to come to me, my friend? All right, so I'm going to just quickly give you one little image, and then I'm going to play a song for you. The image is this. There's a neuroscientist named V.S. Ramachandran. The neuroscience that we tend to know about it, the people who aren't, we're lay people, or I would say lay around people, tend to be good storytellers. Ramachandran is one of those guys. And he became very interested in the phenomenon of phantom limb pain. And so I always think that who has no phantom limb pain is, right? The hand's missing, but it still feels like it's there, there's pain. I think there's phantom limb pleasure, but nobody calls the doctor. It's like, doctor, my missing hand, it feels fantastic. I mean, like, we'll never know. Nobody's talking about that. But he had a guy who he was missing his hand, and not only was he missing his hand, but his feeling was that the hand was there and clenching tighter and tighter and tighter, and it sort of eroded this feeling that the guys, it eroded his feeling that life was worth living. And Ramachandran didn't know what to do for him, and he did this thing that's now become standard therapy for certain kinds of phenomenon like this, and paralysis from stroke, for certain kinds of paralysis from stroke. What he did was he made a box. You can see it on YouTube. Just type in mirror box, phantom limb pain. And I always think of it as like this big shoebox that had a mirror on one side and a hole here, but it'd be lower, but I have to do it this way because of the podium. And what he did was he told Ramachandran Ramachandran told the guy to take his hand and put it in the box, right? Let me go over here. Right? And so what he saw was his two hands, right? He saw the two fists, and then he said, open your hand. And the guy looked down, he opened his hand, he saw the other one opening, and the problem immediately began to solve. And I think that's as close as I can come to the idea of what images do. I think that in the course of anybody's life, even the best life, there are all kinds of things that are a bit like phantom limb pain. Maybe your mom died when you were little, or maybe maybe there was a financial catastrophe in your family, or maybe there was a war, or maybe you just had to walk past this one bully every day when you were going to school. All these things happen, and I believe that the only way that we can actually open that up is to have our experience somehow represented like that. So when you think about making images as having the power to do that, it gets more interesting. So now I'm going to tell you a joke that has the word balls in it. So I just thought I'd warn you in case people are offended by the word balls. You can just go like this. Okay, and it's from my neighbor. My closest neighbors are this retired couple named Donovan and Joni Mitchell. They really are named Donovan and Joni Mitchell. I thought they were messing with me. Those are all folk singers for people who are young. And I wanted to say, oh really? That my name's Marky Mark, and this is my husband, like Lady Gaga. I mean, it's like, but those are their real names. And Joni is this Wisconsin farm lady who loves a joke, and she always has some for you. And she likes it to be a little naughty, not too naughty, but just a little. So she calls me over one day, I'm driving on my bike down to Footville to pick up my mail. She goes, come here, I got one for you. She says, there was this dog, and he snored really bad, and the lady who owned him couldn't get any sleep, and they didn't know what to do about it. And So she goes to the vet, and the vet says, I give up, but I've heard this thing, it sounds kind of crazy, but I've heard if you take a ribbon and you tie it around the dog's paws, he'll quit snoring. And she says, oh, the heck with that, I meant with it. But then she goes home and goes to bed, and the dog starts snoring, and she says, oh, what the hell? So she goes over and gets her ribbon out of a ribbon bag, and she goes over to the dog. The dog's name is Chainsaw, and she ties it around his balls, and he quits snoring, and she can't believe it. She's sleeping so nice. And a little while later, in comes her husband, and he's been out with the boys. And he takes off all his clothes, and he falls into bed, and he starts snoring too. And she says, what the hell? So she goes, she ties the red ribbon around the chainsaw. Now she gets a blue ribbon for her husband, and she ties it around his balls. He quit snoring. She can't believe it. It's the first good night sleep she's had in 8 years. She wakes up in the morning, and oh, she feels so good and refreshed, and she goes out the door to go to work. A little while later, her husband wakes up, and he's pretty hungover, and he goes to take a pee. And he looks down, and he sees this ribbon around his balls, and he looks over at Chainsaw, and Chainsaw's trying to get the ribbon from around his balls, and he says, Chainsaw, I don't remember where we were or what we did last night, but by God, we took first and second place. Very nice Wisconsin joke. Well, what's interesting about that joke, for you to be able to get it, what you had to do was you had to hold your mind open. And all the joke is imagine the image, and then this image, and then your body goes like that. Like, what the hell is that? You know, and it's wild because you did have to hold your mind open. You couldn't go at a certain point, oh, tying a ribbon around a dog's balls won't do shit. You couldn't do that. You kind of had to hold it. And if, you know, what's wild about that is the power of just imagining to actually make your body flip around. And that urge that we have to tell each other jokes, what's that? I think it's passing health around, and not just mental health. There's a lot of research that shows that that actually can change your immune system and your stress levels. All right, I'm going to show you my terrible party trick that it will take a year off your life to watch it. It's okay because it takes about a minute off of mine to do it. And then I'm just going to play a song for you that I'd love you to see. So first I'm going to tell you, no, first I'm going to do the party trick, then I'm going to play the song. But I'm going to tell you what this song is first. The song is a song from the movie, it's a song called Unchained Melody. It became the theme song for the movie Ghost. And its image traveled to Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and somebody videotaped their dad singing it. That's what I'm going to show you in a minute because it's amazing to watch this image go and come back. And then here's my little party trick. My party trick is I can sing without moving my lips. I'm going to do it for you right now. Okay, here we go. And this song comes from the image part of me into the image part of you, and I mean it with all my heart. All right?
Goes by.
I'm not quite sure what people might want to ask about. Well, that's the thing about the space, is people can leave and arrive whenever they want to. So we have two microphones, as usual. Actually, one's all the way up here. I think we'll move it back. And one up there. And students get to ask questions first. And, well, there are some questions. So we'll ask people to identify themselves, tell you who they are, where they're from, what they're studying, what they want to know. Start up here. You have to make the microphone. That's it.
Hi, I'm Christine.
Sorry.
You're doing good. Okay. All right. Hi, I'm Christine, and I have several questions for you. They're not really related, but that's okay. First question. Your writing style changes from print to cursive. Is there a process behind that? Or can you elaborate?
Yeah, you know what, it's the kind of thing that until my work was actually studied in college and taught, I had no clue. And I get asked about it a lot, and the frank answer is this. A block of text that's just all capital letters just makes you get bored. So when I have too many capital letters, then I write in cursive because it just looked boring, then that looked boring, and then I change. That is the whole reason. Although people have written papers on why I do that, which I find fascinating.
Right.
I just didn't know no better.
Right. I tend to put print and cursive together, and that keeps me from not getting bored. But Thank you for the perspective. And I have one more question. Obviously, you do a lot of work by hand. Do you draw on the computer? Is that process different for you?
Yeah, it's absolutely different. And I don't write. I do a final draft on computer. But for instance, the book Cruddy that some of you have read was written entirely with a paintbrush. And I find that something different happens when you're writing by hand than when you're writing on computer. There's all the difference in the world as far as your brain is concerned when you're making the letter A, drawing it, versus doing this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there a question over here? No. One over here.
Hi, my name is Miranda. I'm an aspiring cartoonist, and obviously your work is really prolific. And I just wanted to ask you, when did you feel like you had a place in the world of comics, and was that difficult for you? Was it strange?
No, it wasn't difficult, and it was totally by accident. You all know Matt Groening, he's the guy that invented The Simpsons. Anyway, I met him in college, and he was the editor of the school paper. And I didn't know him, but I read the school paper when he became editor. He said, "I will print anything anyone submits." And I thought, really? So my life became trying to come up with something, and then I'd slip it under the door of the newspaper thing at night just to see if he would really print anything. And they were I tried to find horrible things thinking he wouldn't really print them, but he printed everything. I would write letters to the editor by hand, outraged about stuff that happened to me when I was 6. And, dear editor, so he and I kind of started cartooning at the same time. And right around that time, I graduated in '78, alternative papers, y'all have the city paper out this way. Alternative papers were just starting and they needed alternative cartoonists. And so I got into a paper, and then I'd tell them about Matt, and then he'd get into a paper and tell them about me. And it just happened by accident, so I was sort of a cartoonist by the time I already was one by the time I noticed that I was, if that makes any sense. But I really love cartooning, and it's one of the studies that I'm hoping to do at the University of Wisconsin, which is to find out what's going on in the brain when we're reading comics. Because it's different than reading prose, and it's different than just looking at pictures. And I'm really glad that you're making comics. And when I was a young woman, there were women making them, but nobody knew about it. And now it's just wide open, and I'm just so delighted about it. So welcome, cousin.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
Yes.
So, in this era of Facebook, which I usually go on every 6 months to say thank you for my birthday wishes 6 months ago. There's so much, it's TMI, as my children have started saying, too much information. And when I'm writing, sometimes I'll be texting and cracking up at what I'm texting. And my kids will look at me and say, "What are you writing, Mom?" I say, "Oh, I'm just cracking myself up here." And so how do you kind of sift through the difference between reading something where you're like, "Whoa, too much information," and cracking yourself up? I mean, because sometimes they overlap, I'm sure, and sometimes, it's not funny to other people, and you're really funny, so it's how do you kind of sift through, or do you not? Like, whatever makes you laugh, you just go with.
Well, yeah, I have to say that when I'm working, I'm not thinking about anybody else. I'm not even thinking about myself. One of the things I always tell my students after they've written something, when we write, we read out loud, but we don't comment. In the beginning, we don't comment. And I always say, to people, I said, it's none of anybody's business what you've just written. I said, it's not even your business. I don't even feel like it's my business. So it's like I go into a state, and I think that was kind of the thing I was trying to talk about, that there's that deep play, and in deep play, you don't think about the audience, you don't think about that stuff. And also, I have to say, too much information is not quite enough for me. when people start to really lay stuff on me, like, and I'm one of those people, I don't know why, that people, like, I was sitting next to a woman outside of a hotel the other day, and she sat next to me and she goes, "Hi, beautiful," and I went, "Hey, all right, live wire." And then she tried to hand me her shoes because she thought I would really enjoy them. They were called Easy Spirits. They're like walking on clouds. And that might be too much of, she even said TMI, right? Like she even said that to me, and I said, "Not at all." And I held her shoes, and then I handed it back. And, you know, I found that to be really invigorating.
Also, what you were talking about, like the conversations that you have in your head, like stop the conversation,
well, that
judging what you're writing, and I happen to have a span of children that's quite vast, and because I had several, and my 4-year-old, you know, all of a sudden a sandwich will take 45 minutes to eat it because it's a whale traveling along, and my 13-year-old will say, "Are you listening?" And we'll all quietly, you know, crack up.
Yeah, it's very sweet. It's very, there's something that's, and it's still in everybody. That's my feeling. It's still in everybody, although sometimes it's very, very, very deep.
Hi, I'm Sarah Riverside. I literally never ask questions, but you are.
Try to stay right on the microphone.
Hi. Good?
Yes.
You're fascinating to me. I feel like I'm kind of talking to a weird voice in my head when you talk. Together, we didn't have a personal conversation. Anyway, I'm from Los Angeles. I'm a French major, I'm a studies minor, senior. And I have so many things I would love to ask you, but one in particular, it really doesn't have to do with writing, but when you were a child, did you have a special, or what was your relationship to nature and to color? Because, I'm going to be honest, I don't know a huge amount about you and your work. And I really only came to this because I was in the library, but like, now I want to know everything about you, because you're way to do a presentation. But the way that you put words and pictures and color together is fascinating.
Right on. Well, you know, my relationship with nature was, I was out in it a lot. And, but I grew up in a poor neighborhood, and so the nature that I was in also included broken glass, you know, and now I have hypodermic but I don't know, I think I had the same kind of relationship with nature and color that most people do. But I'm glad that you did it. Right on.
Great, thank you.
Yes, here.
Hi, my name is Megan. I am a biology major, but also an aspiring novelist, which confuses people sometimes. But I wanted to ask you about, you talked a lot about like kind of connecting with the child in you, I guess, or like the part of you that's open to the world in kind of this childlike way, and this, I don't know, has this kind of like enthusiasm about everything. And that's like something that really, I think is really great. And it's also something that I've found kind of easy my whole life, I guess, is looking at the world that way. But I don't know, lately, I guess I just turned 20, so obviously I'm like really old. But I
You feel really old.
I feel like I'm losing it, kind of slowly. And that really kind of terrifies me, and I was just wondering how you have been able to get along to that.
Well, you know, I think losing it's part of the deal. It's this, okay? So, you know, if you've ever been dancing on the dance floor and you're in the groove, right? I'm in the groove tonight, I don't know why. I think I'm a bad dancer, and then you fall out of the groove and you have to fake dance for a little while. You know, I always say that my dad would do this move. We'd know he was out of the groove when he did that. That was it. But in a funny way, the only way to get back into the groove is to keep almost fake moving through it. And I wish I had known in junior high that everybody on the dance floor had periods of fake dancing. It's the same thing when you're in the arts, or I would imagine even, you know, biology is the most beautiful art there is. I think that just expecting that out of the groove is part of the deal, and then what you have to do is sort of fake like you're in it. And the only way I can explain it is there's a groove, it never goes away, but we do lose it. And I think that that's what fairy tales are about. I think that that's what so many of our myths are about losing that activating, animating spirit. And so it's part of the challenge in a person's life to figure out how to do it. And part of the way is to chase something that actually fascinates you. You know, and this idea of being a biologist and a novelist, to me, is a perfect combo. We all think that the scientists need artists, you know? But I know that I need science for certain metaphors to help me understand the arts. And that phantom limb painting one is a fantastic metaphor for it. Same thing with kidneys. You know, sometimes I have students who don't like the way they draw, and sometimes I say to them, it's like saying, "Ooh, my kidneys are ugly. Let's get rid of them." It's like, they're your kidneys, you know? And they do an important thing. And I think the arts, that's another metaphor for the arts that it does that. So you'll have to find your way. That's what all those stories are about. You can do it.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Laura. I'm an English major. We were talking earlier. I'm trying to use the microphone tips you gave me. I was just wondering.
You're doing really good.
Oh, good. I was just wondering if you knew the story behind the video at the end.
Oh, Pop Ibrahim, that's his name. And what that is Pop Ibrahim lives in well, and I only know it from YouTube. I stumbled on it on YouTube because I'm always looking for people who sing who don't really sing. And so I stumbled on it, and what I've been able to find out was his daughter, who's from Kuala Lumpur, was visiting him, and that's his song from the movie The Ghost. And he talks like my grandma. He had the same accent, so I got really giddy. And then I heard him hit those notes and the way he sang, and it made me crazy to think that that song, Entertained Melody, was written for a prison movie in the 1950s that didn't do very well. Then it was the Righteous Brothers recorded it, and then it became the theme song for The Ghost. And somehow this dude heard it and sang it, and then that's what I love about technology. And then he was in here singing it to us. Like, that part blows my mind, the transportation of the image. But it was just something I found on YouTube, and I know his name is Pop Ibrahim because that was in there. And I want to thank Pop Ibrahim because I just think it's boss to see this little guy hitting those notes. You know? Did you like it? Did you like hearing him sing it?
Yeah, I really liked it.
I didn't know how it would play. I didn't know if y'all would go, "Oh hell," or if you go, "Oh." I had a friend who, you know, there was an idea about toilet training little kids that was brief, but somebody said, "You must play this certain song over and over for the kid." And my poor friend, that was the song for the parents. So he would have hated to hear that. It was like, oh man.
Just two more questions now.
Hi, I'm Susan, and our heritage, my sister and I is Filipino. You did a really spot-on, Filipino accent, so thank you. I really enjoyed that.
Walang anuman.
So, I'm an adult. I'm very inspired to see all the college people here. But as an adult, you know, we live in the real world, a lot of stressors. So I just want to know, because I'm realizing, like, the drawing, I used to do that when I was younger, but I don't. So how would you recommend for adults to help de-stress and tap into their creative side?
Well, you can do it in about 5 seconds. When you get home, everybody actually, when you get home, find a grocery bag, put your hand down on it, trace your hand. Then, on that traced hand, put a little beak and a hat and 2 little legs and a cigarette, because everything looks better smoking a cigarette. And then have that, and then it turns into a turkey. Then you have that turkey say something to someone you hate, and then throw it in the garbage. And it will make you feel good the way Chicken Attack by Jack made you feel good. It doesn't have to be a big deal. It doesn't have to be something that goes anywhere, but it has to be something that engages that other part of the brain that we saw when I showed you that stuff of Kazanaga, showing the 2 hands fighting. Or you have to be like you have to be more like Chicken Attack by Jack dude instead of the mom, and up with the portalettes. So here's a trick I have for you. When you're working on something, and you're working, kind of having a good time, but that little voice comes in, like this is stupid or whatever, one of the things I do, I go, okay, you draw it. Yeah, it's just make something.
Last question.
Hi, I'm Gavin Trudeau. I'm a sophomore, probably a math major actually.
Right on.
I was wondering, when you're drawing or writing or creating, how often are you satisfied with that work? And what makes you satisfied with it?
God, that's such a good question because almost every cartoonist I know kind of hates the way they draw. Yeah, you know, so you hate it. Do you know that there's a cartoonist named Chris Ware who is probably one of the best draftsmen ever, and he can't stand the way he draws. I think that that's part of the deal, but one of the things I notice is, and this is something I tell my students, I make something and then I put it away and I don't look at it, I don't look it over for like about 24 hours if I can do that. Because when I'm making something, I'm having an experience. When I'm looking it over, all I'm trying to figure out is my baby defective? I mean, like, that's all you're trying to figure out, right? So if you can pause that part, oftentimes if I wait a little bit and I come back, then it's not a problem. And I have a lot of strips that I stopped at panel 3 that I find like a year later and go, what was the problem? There wasn't any problem with it. So that problem that you see might be a hallucination, it might not be, and that's the value of having really good teachers. I'm not that good teacher. I'm the one that can get you to draw the thing. I'm not very good at getting it polished and helping people get it polished. But I do know that not liking your work is part of the deal, you know. And if you do really love your work, I've just never met anybody who did that. Well, yeah, I haven't met him. I don't want to talk to him very much. I'm glad you're doing math. Pure mathematics. It's beautiful. It's like the image world. It's where is it? It's all around us, but where is it? Yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
Lynda, thank you very much.